President Trump says that the Iranians want an off-ramp. Is that Trump being hopeful, or is the administration pointing you to specific things that show that?
They're not pointing anything specific to us. They're saying it. They're saying there are conversations mainly between third parties, other countries, Turkey, Pakistan, Egypt. But we're not in those conversations, so right now we have two sides saying separate things.
Very clearly, as you laid out, you're reporting that Iran views this as some kind of trap. The Iranians are experts at playing the victims, which is their way of trying to get more concessions so that the U.S. proves their good intent. Is there two camps inside the administration on this, one pushing to go the diplomatic route, one pushing to double down on strikes with the Iranians, or is it unified?
Well, the administration is doing sort of both simultaneously because, as we write in our piece, that's Trump's style, is he masses military force, or in the phrase of one of the people that we quoted, is Trump has one hand outstretched to make a deal, and the other hand is clenched in a fist, waiting to punch you in the effing face, as someone had said. And that's basically how he conducts this gunboat diplomacy. You saw it in Venezuela, you saw it last year in Iran, you saw it last month in Iran, and now the question is whether we're going to see it one more time in extreme fashion, which is Donald Trump says, let's make a deal, here's what I want, let's sit down, let's make a deal. And if he doesn't get what he wants, and if he feels like, in his words, he's being tapped along, he pulls the trigger, he pushes the button, and bombs start going off, and military action starts taking place.
Now, I thought it was going to happen last week to a greater extent over the weekend. President Trump has an impressive list of grievances. I think some of them are well-founded in terms of what the coverage of this war has looked like. Here he is just a few minutes ago talking about how Democrats won't give him the credit he or the military deserve.
They want to deflect from all of the tremendous success that we're having in this military operation. I won't use the word war because they say if you use the word war, that's maybe not a good thing to do. They don't like the word war because you're supposed to get approval. So I'll use the word military operation, which is really what it is. It's called a military decimation. But they don't like the good publicity. They don't like to see us succeed.
Was the White House expecting more good publicity, thus why, in what they said was a 4 to 6 week campaign, they're 3 to 4 weeks in and already talking about a deal?
I haven't asked them that, but you hinted earlier at one of the issues at the White House that some of the people we had spoken to had mentioned to us, which is Donald Trump sort of moved more quickly on this than the messaging otherwise would have allowed. That is, normally when you engage in, let's call it a military conflict, in deference to the president here, not a war, but it's a war, usually you prepare sort of the ideological, the public relation field. You tell people we're going to do X, Y, and Z because A, B, and C. And Trump didn't really do that because he had an opportunity to kill the supreme leader of Iran, the Ayatollah, with Netanyahu, with the Israelis, and he decided to greenlight that operation rather suddenly on February 28th. As a result of sort of moving ahead quickly with that, they moved in secrecy. It was a sneak attack, and they didn't do all of those pretexts and lay that groundwork for people to understand why this was going to happen. And so here we are, sort of outpaced it. I mean, militarily, this is clearly a success, unless all of the information we're getting is a lie. I don't think it is. The problem that the president is having is that while, yes, militarily it's a success, people in the United States aren't on the battlefield. They're not looking down from B-52s on all of these things being blown up. They're driving in their cars, and they're looking at their gas prices go up. They're looking at the threat of inflation increasing. They're looking at interest rates not coming down. And that is the problem he's having, is that it's a political issue. And in the political space, in the public relations space, he's losing that, if you look at the polling. So there's the military success, but then there's sort of the political failure.
Now, we've said over the past couple of weeks that this is the first president to be having massive battlefield success and losing the PR war, even on the war. In the United States. Mark, this though brings up the important point of Israel, that was this sort of very forward part of the alliance. There was a lot of discussion about it in the first couple of weeks, and now that is all but disappeared in this. Is that because the administration is worried about what's happening inside the Republican Party vis-a-vis support of Israel?
If you look at the polling, the support for Israel is not cratering the way the media coverage and the elite influencers would have you believe. However, the elite influencers, Tucker Carlson, for instance, Steve Bannon, Megyn Kelly to a degree, Candace Owens, they all do have big microphones and they are very present on social media. And that conversation does undoubtedly reach the White House. It is a bit of a concern. There's also just a concern that the broader body politic doesn't see Donald Trump as having agency. And that's really what the White House dislikes the most. The idea that he can sort of be tricked into a war by Netanyahu. That was sort of at the heart of the real heartburn that the White House had with Joe Kent when he resigned as the national terrorism or counterterrorism official. He said essentially that Donald Trump got swindled or hoodwinked or whatever, fooled into this war by Netanyahu. And in the White House's perception, essentially what Kent was saying is that the president didn't know what he was doing, and the White House really resents that.
Yeah, no president likes to be told that they were the ones who were manipulated or fooled or whatever. My producers are going to kill me, but I'm going to steal about another minute from the next segment because I wanted to ask you this next question. Help me understand what their plan is going forward, the president's plan going forward. Can they keep having, on one hand, on the other hand?
Well, I don't know, and that's the thing with Trump. His people, the people who support Donald Trump call it strategic ambiguity. His opponents call it madness. But regardless, Donald Trump does have that history of saying negotiate, 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 and at the same time he masses forces. And I think what's important to understand here is the USS Tripoli is in the theater or is approaching the theater. There are now more forces there than ever. 82nd Airborne, if it's not there yet, is on its way. So we're going to reach the point soon where if Donald Trump wants to push the button, he's going to push the button. Can't say he's going to do it, but it's getting real close.
Well, and also he now has the added ability to say, look, I tried to negotiate, and now much more of the Arab world is behind me. Marc Caputo will wait for the next exclusive in Axios. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.